Okay, everybody, welcome back to the Lechtich Musar podcast. We continue with the Pele Yoeitz. We are on page 577 in the art scroll. We're on day 209 in Hachzik. We continue with the Indian of Halicha, Ois Hey. We can talk about travel. Halicha yesh basur meira al derech tesiv asher esher shel halach b'atzos Hashem. Even something as simple as traveling, even that there's an aspect. The person has to be careful. There's an Indian of Surmira. When a person goes, he travels for a mitzvah, there's reward for the steps. And for every step, there's a malach that's created. But on the contrary, in a corresponding matter, in a corresponding matter, when someone goes to do something sinful, it creates the opposite type of angel. And says the Pele Yoeitz that praiseworthy is the person who is in prison, quote unquote, to the Beis HaMedrash, meaning he constantly dwells there. The Yitzhahara sets out, spreads a net for his feet, and bad things can happen during travel, as we'll see. Yitzhahara justifies, he says it's okay. He says it's good to mingle and to get used to people. He'll be able to know what's going around, his surroundings. And sometimes from his whereabouts, he'll pick up something good. The Pele Yoeitz is saying that someone is going to justify his acts. He's not talking about murder. He's not talking about Chol Shabbos. He's talking about going on a travel, on a trip, and he's saying a person. We have a glimpse into the godless of the Pele Yoeitz. He's saying that a person could justify this trip by saying that he'll chop a piece of his iris. He'll look at the Grand Canyon and Niagara Falls, right? But he has to always be thinking, what are you doing? You're being mevatel Torah. A person has to make a shikol that there's so much schar that can happen during this time of travel. And a person has to make a true cheshbon because he's giving up. He's putting time into this trip. It's important to always to take a bit with a bit of grain of salt. The Pele Yoeitz, it was on a very high level. He was talking from Divrei Kabbalah, all of Shas. There's a tremendous tzaddik, and these days we know, and this is something he's going to bring up later, that tzaddikim would go on trips, and gedolim and rebbes, we know they would go. So how can it be? What's the Pele Yoeitz saying? It's important to realize there's idealistic directives and hasagas, and we don't really live on that and consult with your das Torah. But the point is, this is what the Pele Yoeitz is saying, that we see the chashivas, the erech, the value of every minute, and how there has to be a real shekel evaluation because there's Torah that's being given up for this purpose. So it's an important idea. In practicality, we go on trips, even vacations, and the idea that permeates this whole topic over here, which really talks about, is if you're doing it l'shem shamayim, you're doing it to recharge, to refresh, to reinvigorate, to reconnect. We need that. We're human beings, and if that's the case, then it's being done l'shem shamayim, and then the whole vacation becomes, we can elevate anything, which is something he spoke about. Even when you eat food and you eat tanugim and you sheina, sleeping, anything can be elevated as long as there is intention, as long as we put ourselves in the right frame of mind. So this is no different, and that's something we'll talk about soon. I think it's very important. There's something very important that the Pele Yoeitz over here tells us, something to keep in mind, not just for travel, but for anything. A yid, a ben Torah, anyone in Klal Yisrael, every yid always has to be thinking that mashu mafsid she'efshar sheyava lidei dibur masurim urius asurs v'chein arais. Especially as Nisan's coming, Pesach is coming, there's opportunities to travel. We go visit people, we're visiting family, parents, grandparents, in-laws, cousins, wherever it may be. If we're going to a hotel, there's endless places that we can be going, but there's definitely an uptick in travel. There's an uptick of driving, of flying, maybe trains. And the Pele Yoeitz reminds us that we always have to cheshbon, we always have to be michashev, that there's a possibility that we are going to encounter forbidden speech, forbidden sights. And as we're on our whereabouts and doing whatever we're doing, there's an extremely important maisa, which I heard a long time ago, which reminds me of a story I once heard about the great gadol, the tzaddik, Bar Leib Steinman. The story goes, there's a bar mitzvah bacher that was so excited. His father booked tickets for a very special, momentous trip. They were going to go together, travel to the great gadol, the tzaddik, and the tzaddik was going to put tefillin on this bacher for the very first time. They packed their bags, they set out to the airport, and the bacher was clutching onto his tefillin, holding it so tight, so dear. He was so excited, and here he goes, he's going to get on a trip, go to Eretz Yisrael, it's going to be amazing. He's going to go to Bnei Brak, to Bar Leib with his father. A trip, memories that will last forever. Before boarding the plane, the father thought it would be a smart idea just to make sure. Spoke to the Gabbai a few months before, and he decided, let me just double check, tell him that we're going to be there in about 24 hours, flying and getting there, and we should be there in a couple of days. And just to double check with the Rosh Hashiva, he called the Gabbai, and he said, Gabbai, I just want to let you know, we're excited, we're here, we're in the airport, and we're going to be there very shortly. And the Gabbai said, let me just double check with the gadol. A minute later, the Gabbai comes back to the phone. The father sensed there was something off. The Gabbai's voice was a bit shaky, quivering. And the Gabbai says, sorry to break it to you, but the Yeshiva directed me to tell you, turn around. The father says, what? Did I hear that correctly? He says, yeah, turn around, call me back soon. Picks up his bags, tells his son, listen, I don't know how to explain this to you. Maybe the Rosh Hashiva is not feeling well. Maybe something happened, family circumstances. But we have to abide. We have to listen. Das Torah. We're going to pack our bags. We're going to go back home and we'll figure this out later. His son was sad. His eyes swelled, filled with tears. And the father said, don't worry, we're going to figure this out. But right now the Rosh Hashiva, or Bar Leib, told us you have to turn around. We must turn around. They pack their bags. They get off the security line. They explain that they have to leave. They need their bags back. They're already checked in. Get into the car. And once the father kind of reoriented, got his mind mentally back together, and he was ready to understand the situation, he calls the Gabbai back up. And he says, can we understand? Can you explain what transpired, what happened? We were going to come, and then he told us to turn around. What's going on? And the Gabbai explained very simply. He said, yes, there's inspiration. There's chizik. There'll be memories that you'll look back to forever from this moment, from the time the Rosh Hashiva would have put on your tefillin for your son. But then there's real change. There's real growth. There's being a real Eved Hashem, which will happen not by coming to Bnei Brak, but by staying put in your shul, in your home, and not going through the challenges, the temptations, and the nisonos that an airport brings. Shmiras Einayim, guarding one's eyes. If your son can remember for the rest of his life that instead of going to Bnei Brak, to Bar Leib, he turned around and went home and circumvented, sidestepped all those nisonos, because that's true growth. That's true change. That's true impact, lasting, enduring forever. That will be a much greater lesson to your son than coming and having the Rosh Hashiva put his tefillin on. What we see from here, it's not just about Shmiras Einayim. Of course, there's a lesson in Shmiras Einayim, but it's about every area in life. That sometimes we chase the big moments, the big experiences, the big inspiration. But sometimes when we're truthful, when we're emstic to ourselves, we realize that growth is really based on the quiet choices. Not in what we're willing to go into, to enter, but we're willing to walk away from and to leave behind. Because who a person becomes is not defined by moments he stands in front of greatness. Greatness is defined by moments he quietly chooses. Choice is in our hands. Choice is our bechira. And when we choose right, not just for the short-lived inspiration, but for true lasting growth, That's called being a true Eved Hashem. That's called being a real Ben Melech. Okay, moving on. Pele Yoeitz continues, talking about this Indian of travel. V'atam el-chacham l'ishma l'kol melach Hashem ha'im shekin dakim shal tamidei chachamim gedolei Yisrael. Something we brought up before this story. People will say, oh, the gedolim go, the tzaddikim go, but the Pele Yoeitz says no. Don't bring a raya. Don't infer from them. Sheyitzim kipam bepam kriyas chutzos. They go out, they go on walks, they go on strolls. Because he says that these tzaddikim, these gedolim, these are yadu es asher asu v'kavanasam mitzur l'shamayim. Their intentions are favored in heaven. They're doing it l'shma, they're doing it for the right reasons, and we can't say it because they're doing it, we can do it as well. Says the Pele Yoeitz, "Ve'en lecha tiyul tov min beis hamedrash u'pardes hatzadikim v'garlam tal began Eden." This is a poetic, very profound idea over here, that if a person wants to take a stroll, there's no greater stroll than to the beis medrash. He says that a person who's involved in business, you can't for any money in the world get him to leave the business, to get distracted with other things. He's focused on the money. He says the same thing for a person who's focused on the schar l'olam haba, a person who's focused on his nitzchis, on his eternity. You shouldn't be able to get him so easy to come on trips and strolls and vacations. He should be focused on the money, focus on the ruchnis, focus on the goal. If a person does this in gashmis and for sure in ruchnis, a person should work tirelessly without wasting any time. And if he's taking a stroll, it should be to the beis medrash. As it says, if you were to seek the Torah as if it was silver, then you will understand the fear of Hashem. And then the Pele Yoeitz finishes up, there are such things as going on a trip for a dvar mitzvah. And the Pele Yoeitz, he says over here as well, that a person has to be careful and make a shikol if it's worth going, because there's also the element that he might be being mevatel Torah. That when you're abandoning the Torah, quote unquote, that's the kiyum, that's sustaining, that's upholding the Torah. And for other tamachacham, larutz the mitzvah of the nimne im chaver of the dar mitzvah. A tamachacham, even if there's a cheshbon of Torah, he should go and run to the mitzvah, so that other people see that doing mitzvahs is important, even by the tamachacham. He should set example. He should be a role model for others to do the same thing. And the merit of the public will be attributed to him.